All right, everybody's favorite topic, lead follow-up. So I'm going to start with this question because I think my dad and I think Amar and Diane, you guys probably heard my father ask this question, and he would stand up in front of the audience and he'd say, "You guys tell me the definition of a lead, and I'll tell you how many homes you're going to sell." And then he would say, "Elsa, you right there, yeah, stand up," right, and you'd make everybody uncomfortable. And he'd say, "Elsa, tell me the definition of a lead," and you'd be uncomfortable, and you'd say, "Well, someone is thinking about buying and selling," and he'd say, "Right, you're going to sell 3 homes this year," and sit down. And then you're like, "What?" And then you go, "Diane, stand up," right? Because he always likes the blondes in the front row. And he'd say, "Stand up," right? And then he'd say, "You tell me the definition of a lead." And then you get paralyzed because you're like, "Mine was the same as Elsa's," right? And you're like, "I don't know," right? And he'd say, "Sit down," right? And he'd force people to think through, well, what is the definition of a lead? And I will tell you guys, and you guys have heard this because you're my clients and friends, that the biggest problem in the industry today is there's a lot of companies that will sell you leads. And then we agents, since we don't have a definition of a lead, we think a lead is someone who's thinking about buying and selling and they'd actually want to do it. And then they sell you someone that is looked at a listing on Facebook, clicked the button, and then between the advertiser and Facebook, stole the information and didn't even ask permission for it really. And then they handed that to you and said, "There's a lead." And we're like, "Oh, I got a lead," right? And that's, and I love what Gary Keller said a couple of years back. And he said, there was like 100 million leads sold to real estate agents last year. And he's like, someone made a lot of money, right?
Because how many houses sell?
Someone made a lot of money, meaning the people selling agents leads made a lot of money. It's kind of strange that Zillow has a valuation of $1 billion and all they do is sell agents leads. Wow, that's interesting. They made $1 billion. Jeez Louise, that's incredible. So we got, this, it's actually this conversation of how we define a lead is incredibly important and is also at the expense of the last 5 years is actually agents have lost a lot of money in this topic. And so we really need to really up our game. Okay. So I created a new definition of a lead. So I want you guys to think this through. And now you guys are my coaching clients. So I'm going to share the document with you. But really what I decided was, I was like, we need to create a new definition. And I wrote down verified buyer. They're a verified buyer. And here's how I define it. I defined it as because again, we're talking about internet leads or open house leads or any lead, is I have a full name, I have a valid cell phone, and I have a valid email address. That's a good start, right? Especially with internet leads. Next, I know what area and price range. They've revealed that to me, that I'm interested in this area, I'm interested in this price range. That's a very simple start. The next thing I wrote down is their current living status, right? Do they rent? Do they own locally, right? Or where do they own? Are they relocation? Pretty good, useful to know that. Then, of course, there's the basics of the ideal property characteristics. Yep, that's useful. Maybe any lifestyle qualities and characteristics. Next thing I wrote down is motivation. And I love this, I've heard this from Bill Pipes, the logical reasons why they want to buy. And then there's the emotional reasons why they would want to buy, right? Then the next one I wrote down is ideal time frame. And then the next thing I wrote down is that finance has been discussed, right? Are they cash? Do they have an established relationship? Are they a yes to an introduction? So I created a new definition called verified buyer. Now, if I said to you guys, I have a bunch of verified buyers that they've answered all of these questions, how much would those leads be worth to you today? What's the value of that lead? Pretty good, right?
Yeah, very
really high.
Sure.
Now, what I like so I basically created a definition. So now we have a standard. And with the standard, doesn't that also then kind of spin into that it could be kind of a script? Like these are the things that we would need to know. And then also, these are also the questions we should probably be asking, right? And then now I understand like how to move forward with this person or not, or I understand what I need to figure out next, right? So in one of the in the world of lead follow-up, one of the problems we have in lead follow-up is when we use our CRMs, our customer relationship, we actually, because we don't have a system with the CRM, we don't use them because they're useless. So because I don't take notes in a structured, organized manner that helps me to move the customer along, then the CRM's useless. And that's why most people don't use them. It's not because the CRM isn't functional. It's that there's no strategy and system in the way that you use it that actually helps you to move the customer forward and to be successful. So that's why CRMs don't get used. It's not because they're not great. It's because there's no strategy or system of how to use it with the customer. So if we think about this, if we take my definition of a verified prospective buyer, and now we have a purpose for our notes, right? We need to, hey, do I have this? Do I have that? 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 No, I don't. Therefore, in my lead follow-up, this key question is what do I know? And then what do I not know? So here's what I know. Oh, here's what I don't know. Therefore, lead follow-up has purpose. So now when I do lead follow-up, the goal is to just ask the next questions on your list of things to ask so that we can complete the process called I have a verified buyer, right? So it's like the mission would be, hey, I want to have a database of verified buyers. That's what I want to have. Okay. And what happened for me is once I wrote this out, I was like, wow, that's really cool. Now, could we use, so, Amar, you've done a good job with series of text messages and emails and things to kind of keep yourself front and center with the lead for a long period of time. And so if we got a lead that came in and it wasn't fully verified, and there's still a lot of things that we didn't know, could we, in essence, create a text message and an email asking every one of those questions as part of our lead follow-up drip campaign? Yes. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, here's the question. And you can do a text question and an email question, text question, email question, text, email. And then we can, with our CRMs and simple automation, we can start chipping away at some of these things that we know and don't know. Right. That's kind of.
How would you do it though? Because you may have bits and pieces of this, right? So if you put together a full drip campaign with all these questions and set it like as an automatic drip campaign, you might be redundant asking some of the questions you already have answers to though. That's my question on it, right?
Yeah. So if you created the templates, so if we're going to create a text template and an email template that we would then have to put in the order of a campaign. So I'd have to create a new campaign that says, hey, campaign, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send this text and this email, right? And we're going to do it in this frequency, plus this one, plus that one, and this frequency, plus that one, this one. Okay. So I'd have to create a campaign for the whole. But that means I have to have each one of those text and email templates in my resource library. So your team members, because you've got all kinds of leads in your database all over the place with variation, then they may just go into the database and go, what do I know? What do we not know with this lead? And then go, well, here are my options. Why don't I just send this one and that one? Since I know this and I don't know that. I know this, I don't know that. Therefore, I can text this and email that. I can call and ask. They didn't answer the phone. I can text and email and get the thing rolling. It gives it, because we now have a roadmap of what we need to know. And then we have all the options. It gives us scripting and it gives us messaging, right? But if I had a new lead, you get a new lead that comes in and, whatever happens, let's say it's a Zillow lead and you book an appointment and then they don't show, they cancel the appointment. Uh-oh. Okay. We kind of have no name and cell phone and email, and that's about it, right? They just mentioned a property. So we're pretty much stuck there, right? That's all we know. Cool. Right. Set them up on the campaign. There you go. That person gets the whole campaign. Okay. Now, obviously, ultimately at the end of the day, I will tell you guys the purpose of the automated text and email stuff. What's the purpose of that stuff?
People to communicate.
Yeah, to get them to engage so that we can make a call and create a conversation. And I think this is where there's a lot of confusion around that, right? It's like, well, are we going to wait to see if the text message and email campaign completes the whole process so that I have a verified prospective buyer all the way through A through Z? That sounds great, but that's not really the purpose. The purpose is, get them to respond to a relevant question that is the next logical question of our perfect customer. And then when they respond, it gives us an excuse to call to see if we can complete the rest of the questions. You see what I mean? And then if they don't pick up the phone, that's fine, because the next text will go out and the next logical questions will ensue, right? So anyways, it's just, we have to think through the logical progress and the most important questions along the way to get us there. Okay, so that's that. Next, okay, the next question really we got to address in lead follow-up. First is we've got a definition. Now that's great. Okay, then the next thing is, all right, when we hear time frame, so someone says, well, we're 90 days out, we're 6 months out, we're 1 year out. Now, what do we do? And this is where I think the hard game really begins. Okay, first is getting the ideal time frame out of them. So if now in the world that I was playing in, I was using a CRM status that said hot, watch, and nurture. And the way that I defined the status, because you have to define the status, you have to create a strategy for the CRM that makes sense. So to me, hot was someone that literally could buy a home within the next 90 days, right? Then watch was in that 6-month window. And then nurture was 1 year or greater. So I had definitions of my statuses that allowed me to now use my CRM effectively. That helped me. Okay. Now, the next step, though, of course, is, well, then if they're in a hot status, if you say they have, there's a possibility or a good possibility that they could buy a house in the next 90 days, then the next move is, what is the minimum standard of action that an agent should take with every single person in the hot status? What's the minimum standard of action? Right? Because remember, we already have the verified, like most likely we've got 75 to 80% of the verified buyer questions answered for them to be in the hot category, right? I mean, like we can just assume that that's the case. Right? You may not have all 100% of those questions answered, but you're probably 75% of the way there. And if you're not, then they don't deserve to be in there yet, right? Okay, so we're just going to assume that, because again, we're going to define it. We're going to have rules and reasons. So if you're in the hot, I would say that the minimum standard would be that you have looked at their save search, you have made a call and checked in with them, you have sent them a text message, and you have maybe commented on a property in their save search once a week as a minimum standard, right? Is that a safe request? Would that, protect you against losing the deal? If once a week you made one call and checked in, you made one text to check in, you looked at their save search and their activity on the save search, and you send an email with a comment about a property in their save search. Hey, I was looking at this property that was, in your category this week, and I like this. I didn't really like that. Let me know what your feedback is. Have a great day. Let me know if you guys are up to anything next. Would that activity baseline protect you against losing the opportunity with a hot? What do you think? Okay. Could we have a standard also that says you don't get into the hot category? Let's raise the standard. Let me actually say one interesting thing. I love what my dad used to say. He used to say, if you raise the standard, you can have less leads and sell more homes. Well, that's cool. Raise the standards. And so I also just ask back, okay, well, who deserves that level of attention? What would they have to do? What would they have to achieve to deserve that much attention from you every week, right? Because, time is money. And if I'm going to give that much time to a particular lead every single week for the next 90 days, time is money. Therefore, they must earn and deserve that time and attention from me every week. So then, well, what's the standard for how they achieve the status of hot in your mind? Right? Would they have to have completed a buyer consultation to be in a hot? Would they have to have would they have answered all of the questions, right? And also, you would have to have met with them face to face to be in a hot. I don't know, raise your standard. Would, one of the questions, of course, on there is that we could add on to our list of verified buyers is that they have agreed to work with you. Raise your standards, right? They've agreed to work with you to some degree. The higher you raise your standards, the more you would be willing to commit to them, the more you would be willing to commit the time, effort, and energy on a weekly basis for them. The more you would be excited to follow the process of the hot, raise the standard. Okay, so it's a really important concept. As the moment you lower the standard is the moment that when you open up the database and you look down the list, that's when you go a negative spiral and you're like, man, and then you don't want to give your attention to that list, because when you look down the list, you're like, well, that person's never going to do anything. They never responded. That person, I don't even, I don't know anything about this person. And then the moment you do that, or the moment any agent does that, they immediately go into a negative tailspin. And now they see the database as useless, and they see the CRM as useless. They see the leads as low quality, and then they're not motivated and inspired. We lowered the standard. We have no standards for what they're there. There's no action plan. There's no strategy for the CRM. Okay, let's flip over to watch. They said inside of the time frame that they said that there's, kind of in the 6-month window. They're like 6 months out. Okay, so if they're in the 6-month out, then what would be my action plan for them? Right? What would be the standard for them to achieve in my watch category? Well, I think a minimum standard would be to take what we were doing with the weekly action plan for the hot and maybe just do it at a minimum every 2 weeks with the watch. Every 2 weeks, we make a call. Every 2 weeks, we send a text. Every 2 weeks, we look at their saved search, make a comment on a listing, right? That just makes sense. If they said 6 months, every 2 weeks, it's pretty safe. Protect yourself against losing the opportunity. And then, of course, on the nurture, they are like, we're 1 year out. What would be the standard there? Maybe every 30 days? Seems like a lot, but it also seems pretty safe, right? So what we did, in essence, what I was trying to do is we really have to, define the definition of the lead. We have to define the status, how someone achieves a status, the milestones, what it takes to earn a position in that status, and then define what our minimum standard of action is for that status. Right? When you tell, you could tell the person, hey, so since you're about 6 months out, what I'll do is, what I do with everybody who's about 6 months out is I just check in twice a month. I look at your saves, I look at your listings, I'll make some comments, I'll send you an email, I'll just check in with you, see if you have any questions, see if there's any feedback that you have, if there's anything we need to do to support you. I'll do that about every other, twice a month. Does that sound good? You just tell them and they're like, great. And then if they're in the hot, yeah, we're kind of about 90 days away. We're just kind of sorting through some personal stuff. Cool. Here's what I do when people are 90 days out. I look at your saved search. I look at the properties once a week. I check in just once a week. I'll send you a text. I'll give you a call just to see if there's anything that you need help with, any properties that are catching your eye, seeing if there's anything that you're learning about your preferences that I can add to my list, customize the list. Once a week, I'll just check in with you. Sound good? Oh, that's great. Perfect. Oh, you're 1 year out. Good. What I do is I just check in once a month, right? Obviously, everybody's on a listing alert, right? Everybody's verified buyer. Remember, I already set the stage for that. So now it's just, I'll check in with you about once a month, right? See anything I can do to help, see what you guys are up to, see if there's anything I can do to customize the save search, see if there's any questions you guys got, and just to double check, make sure you guys are doing well. Now you can commit to them, and now they're like, great. You set the expectation, you set the relationship, and now we're off and running. Tell me the definition of a lead, and I'll tell you how many homes you're going to sell, right? Brilliant. Helpful?
Yeah, super.
Yes. Yeah.